to 180 degrees centigrade. Once the butter has melted, add in 125 grams of soft brown sugar. Just cook that on a low heat just for about 5 minutes until the sugar slightly dissolves. I've got 350 grams of rhubarb, which is about 6 or 7 stalks. Chop the rhubarb into about 2 centimetre pieces, 1.5 to 2 centimetre pieces. Go back to stir the butter and the sugar. So turn the heat off and then sprinkle the rhubarb onto that. So I have got here 200 grams of plain cream flour, into which I'm going to add a teaspoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So get a whisk. And I usually just kind of whisk this mixture all together. In here, I've got 200 mils of buttermilk or sour milk. Into this, I'm going to add 2 eggs. And whisk that. Followed by 75 mils of sunflower oil. There we go. Followed by another 125 grams of brown sugar. Just mix it in. And then I'm going to put in a little bit of ginger, just 1 teaspoon of finely grated ginger. So whisk all that together. So pour into the plain flour, the baking soda, the baking powder, the salt. Pour in this thin liquid. I've got in here the buttermilk, the oil, the eggs, the brown sugar, and the ginger. And this is like a batter. So whisk it all together like this. Pour this batter on top of the rhubarb, which is sitting in the butter and sugar mix. Yum. Pop it straight into the oven, which is preheated to 180 degrees centigrade. It will take about half an hour to cook, or even as long as maybe 40 minutes. The center needs to be set when you press it. So transfer it into the oven. While that is cooking, I'm going to make some soup. This is a broccoli soup, and I'm going to serve it with Parmesan toasts, which are like little Parmesan soldiers that my children love to dip into the soup. And I think it's very important to get children eating soup because it can be packed with vegetables. I have got 25 grams of butter that I'm going to put on the heat and allow the butter to melt. Add in 300 grams, which is 1 large onion, chopped. This is going to be all liquidized, so it doesn't need to be very, very finely chopped. Followed by the same weight, 300 grams of peeled and chopped potatoes, which is about 2 potatoes. Okay, once the potatoes and onions are cooking in the butter, turn down the heat to low. Season it with some salt and pepper. Okay, stir it around and then let it sweat so that it cook on a very gentle heat, and cover it, if you like, with a butter wrapper or with a sheet of greaseproof paper or something, just to keep all the steam in. So it's going to cook, but it's not going to burn, it's not going to colour at the edges. It's just going to turn very nice and soft. Now I'm going to prepare the broccoli. Cut off just the bottom of the stalk, just the tough end from the stalk. And I'm going to use the rest of the stalk because there's still lots of goodness in the stalk too. So cut the stalk right up to where the florets begin. And then just peel a little bit with a peeler or with your knife, just the tough outer skin. After the potatoes and onions have been cooking for 10 minutes, I'm going to add the chopped broccoli stalk, they're all about this size, into the potatoes and onions. Allow those to cook a little bit before I add the rest of the broccoli. And 800 mils of chicken stock or vegetable stock can go in too. Bring this up to the boil and allow it to boil for about 5 minutes, by which point the potatoes, the onions and the stalks of the broccoli should be practically cooked. I'm just going to cut up the florets of broccoli like this, and then they will just take a minute to cook once they go in to the boiling stock with the other vegetables. I'm going to turn on the grill because I'm going to be making some little Parmesan toasts. I think at this stage the potato and the broccoli stalk is cooked. Add in the rest of the broccoli. All of the bits. Stir it around and cook it just for a minute until the mixture comes back up to the boil. And then as soon as it comes back up to the boil, remove the lid. Because if you keep the lid on, and this is the same goes for if you're cooking Brussels sprouts, green beans, any kind of green vegetable, whether it's for soup or not. If you keep the lid on while the mixture boils, you tend to lose the fresh green colour and a bit of the flavour as well, but it goes kind of a dull green. Okay, at this stage, I think the broccoli is cooked. So add in some cream. If you like, of course you can leave out cream or you can use milk instead. There's just about 100 mils or 150 mils of cream there. Stir it around, take it off the heat, and ladle it into your liquidizer. Cover it with a tea towel and just remove the inner lid like that, just to allow a little bit of the steam to escape. Oh, lovely. That's a really gorgeous green colour. Now, I've got a tray. I'm going to put on the tray 2 pieces of toast and sprinkle some finely grated Parmesan cheese. Pop them under the grill. Now, I think the Parmesan toasts are ready. Basically just waiting for the cheese to melt. Lovely. Cut it into little fingers. Take a soup bowl and pile up your little Parmesan soldiers. Serve a bowl of soup. Delicious. And there is the gorgeous broccoli soup with little Parmesan toasts. So now the cake is ready. It's been in the oven for 30 minutes and I can feel it's just set in the center. So put it down for a second. Just wait for about half a minute before you turn it out so it's not too hot. But you do need to turn this out while it's hot. If you wait for it to cool, the rhubarb will stick to the bottom of the frying pan and it will be left in there and the cake will come out, but the rhubarb won't. So just while that's sitting for a second, I'll just get some whipped cream out of the fridge. Because you have to have it with a little bit of softly whipped cream. Or I suppose you could have it with something like a thick Greek yogurt or a creme fraiche, but I like whipped cream with it. Now I'm going to turn it out onto a plate. It's quite handy to have a plate with a little bit of a lip on which to serve this, because sometimes the juices can pour off the cake too. This might not necessarily be what you want to do in front of all your guests. But once you have turned it out, it should look pretty spectacular. Lovely. And just kind of center it in the plate. Just clean around the sides of the plate if any of the juices have escaped. And I'm going to cut a slice of this to put on a plate. Divine, look at that. And then, of course, you need a little bit of softly whipped cream over it and just let it yum, melt down. So there we've got the broccoli soup with little parmesan toasts, great for dunking into the soup, and some upside down rhubarb and ginger cake. Here are two ideas for main courses, which are great favourites in my family. I'm going to make a chicken and ginger stir fry with coconut noodles. And I'm going to make a risotto verde. I'm going to begin with the risotto. For this, I need to make a vegetable puree. Put a little bit of olive oil into a saucepan, just a couple of tablespoons. And I'm going to add in about 250 grams of frozen peas, or peas, but these are frozen, and that's absolutely perfect. Once the pan heats up a little bit, then I'm going to add 100 grams of spinach leaves. These spinach leaves have been destalked. If they're baby spinach leaves, there's no need to take off the little stalks, though. It starts up by filling up the whole saucepan, and then it'll just wilt down. So add some salt into the spinach, and some pepper. I have got about 900 mils of chicken stock, or you could use, of course, a vegetable stock, for the risotto. So I'm going to add just about 50 mils of this stock into the peas and the spinach. I'm going to start with the risotto. I have got 1 onion, which I've chopped, and 2 cloves of garlic, which I've crushed quite finely, or you could grate the garlic in too. Next thing, I'm going to add in 350 grams of risotto rice, like arborio rice or carnaroli rice. Stir it around. And you want to hear just a little bit of a sizzle of the rice kind of cooking a tiny bit before I go ahead and add in wine and chicken stock. This is a fantastic risotto dish because it's just cooked in the oven. It's an oven-baked risotto. Risotto is usually cooked on top, on the hob, with stock being poured in very slowly and gradually, and that's a traditional, classical Italian way to make risotto. This method works very well too, I think. Just all of the stock put in at once and put into the oven. And then add in some wine and some stock. I'm adding in 150 mils, or a glass of white wine. And the alcohol does burn off in the cooking of the risotto, so I'm not worried with having this for all the family. And then the remaining stock, so about 800 mils of chicken or vegetable stock. Season the rice and the stock with some salt and some pepper. Bring it up to the boil before putting it into the oven. I have an oven preheated to 180 degrees. The spinach and the peas are cooking. And you see how the spinach has just wilted? That's exactly what I'm looking for. So turn off the heat and liquidize this. Pulse it in a food processor or just whiz it up. If it's a bit hard to whiz up, you can take a little bit of the liquid from the saucepan here and add it into the vegetables. Do make sure that you don't overcook the peas and the spinach, because I want to keep this really lovely fresh green colour and fresh flavour, not overcooked kind of bland flavour. I'll put the lovely green vegetable puree just to the side. I'll add that back into the risotto later on. Now that the stock and the wine with the rice and onions and garlic have come up to the boil, put on the lid. Place this risotto in the oven and cook it for about 15-20 minutes in a moderate oven. While the risotto is cooking, I'm going to make the chicken and ginger stir fry and the coconut noodles. And you need to preheat the wok for really a good 5 minutes before you start to cook in it. Otherwise, the heat is too low and things kind of stew in there. They don't stir fry as they should. I also need to, in this saucepan, heat up about 400 mils of chicken stock and half a tin of coconut milk, While that's coming up to the boil, and while the wok is heating, I'm going to prepare the ingredients for the stir fry. So I'm going to grate 3 or 4 cloves of garlic. This is just for a small amount. Stir fry. When you're making a stir fry, everything needs to be ready in bowls beside you. Otherwise, whatever is in the wok will burn by the time you've chopped or grated the next thing. I'm going to grate about, say, half a tablespoon of ginger. And I've got 1 large chicken breast, which I've cut into very thin slices. I've got 1 carrot that I can cut into lovely thin slices at an angle. Mange tout that I'm cutting into half. The vegetables just look a little bit nicer if you cut them kind of at an angle, didn't they? Look a bit more elongated. And I've got mushrooms here that I've cut into thin slices. And then I've got here, for sprinkling on the stir fry at the end, some toasted cashew nuts. Now that the stock and the coconut milk have come up to the boil, I'm going to add in the noodles. I normally recommend 1 of these sheets per person, so this will feed 2 or 3 people. Once that comes up to the boil, I'm going to turn off the heat and let the noodles sit in there for about 3 or 4 minutes. Now, the wok is really nice and hot. I'm going to add in a couple of tablespoons of sesame oil, and then add in the garlic and the ginger. Stir it just for a few seconds before you add in the chicken, which has been shredded quite thinly, so it'll cook very quickly. I'm just going to turn off the saucepan that the noodles are cooking in, because it's come back up to the boil. Once the chicken kind of changes colour on the outside, add in the mange tout, the carrots, and then the mushrooms. Add some salt and pepper. If it looks a little bit dry, you can always add a little bit more sesame oil. It smells delicious with the sesame oil and the ginger. The heat is still very high, and I suspect it's probably going to be cooked quite soon. Check to see if the chicken, obviously, it needs to be fully cooked, and the vegetables will be just softening. Just while that's finishing cooking, I can give the noodles a little stir. They're practically cooked. The noodles absorb the flavour of the coconut milk really beautifully. Fresh coriander. Chop that up with the stalks. And the noodles are perfectly cooked at this stage. I'm going to drain the noodles, but quite often I make a soup out of the coconut milk and the chicken stock that's in the saucepan. You can boil it with some ginger and garlic and green leaves like pak choi or something to make a really gorgeous soup. And serve. Go. Some coconut noodles in the bowl. Throw a little bit of coriander and toasted cashew nuts into the stir fry, stir it around, and save the remainder for sprinkling over the top at the end. Put the chicken and ginger stir fry on top of the noodles. Divine. Followed by some more toasted cashew nuts and more chopped coriander. Chopsticks are essential. Children, well, my children love trying to eat with chopsticks and trying to use them, so that can be kind of successful or unsuccessful, but gives them a bit of a challenge. I'm now going to cook the asparagus. The asparagus is for going on top of the risotto when I'm serving it. So I need to cook the asparagus in just a little bit of boiling, slightly salted water. Good pinch of salt. Put the lid on, bring it up to the boil just while you prepare the asparagus. And I'm going to cut the asparagus again at an angle. So pop in the asparagus, allow it to cook just for a few minutes. It should be just softening. So as is the same with every green vegetable when you're cooking it, put the lid on. Once the water comes back up to the boil with the green vegetable in the water, take the lid off, allow it to cook uncovered for a couple of minutes, and that keeps the best colour. So now I can get the risotto from the oven. I think it is now cooked. Yes, perfect. The rice has just absorbed all the stock and it's plump and juicy and gorgeous. So, take the green vegetable puree and add that into the risotto. If the green vegetable puree has had time to cool down, well then you need to heat it up again. But don't overheat it. The lovely thing about this is it's really fresh, it's just cooked, and it's not going to taste overcooked or dull. So now you have this really wonderful green risotto, and it's got such a lovely colour. Look at that. Fresh. And I have some grated Parmesan in the fridge. I think at this stage, I'll just check the asparagus to see if it's cooked. Yes, it is. It's just soft. So turn off the heat on the asparagus and drain it. Add in just a drizzle of olive oil and a pinch of sea salt. Take your serving plate. Stir a little bit of Parmesan cheese through the risotto and save some for sprinkling at the end. Oh, it smells so good. Give it a taste. It's fantastic. Spoon it into your serving bowl. With some of the asparagus over the top. And followed by a little shaving of Parmesan cheese. So there are my suggestions for a great family meal. Broccoli soup with Parmesan toasts, chicken and ginger stir fry with coconut noodles, risotto verde, which is a green risotto with peas, spinach and asparagus, and then the lovely upside down rhubarb and ginger cake. I'm sure your family will love these.